diagrams. There's hardly anything that I think back in my education where I did not rely on my eyes to come to understand the concepts involved. And so he, you know, it's one thing if you have sight up to a certain point and then you suddenly don't have it. You know what the students are going through and what they, and you can perhaps draw a diagram from memory on a board that, you know, even though you can't see it, you can still reproduce what was in your memory. But Theral couldn't do that because he didn't learn math that way. And it suddenly hit me. He knew math in a deeper way than I did. Because he had to think things through in a very different way. It took a lot deeper insights than I had. So Rick, you're going to tell about his teaching methods, right? Sure. If you keep me from falling over.
Somewhere in the 90s, I worked in the dean's office part-time, and Renee was on staff there as well. There was an interest in the dean's office in having some articles written about professors, and somehow the word about the blind math professor came to their attention. I was sitting at a table, a large table, the staff were all around it, and all these eyes turned directly towards me. Now, I'd been writing articles for the college newsletter about technology, so they thought I was perfect for this job. So I went out and I interviewed Theral and Nancy, and everything I wrote was vetted later by Theral and Nancy and Renee. Renee watched the process like a hawk. She insisted on having the final reading before it went to print. Anyway, so I'm going to read that article. Please be patient. His class is conducted the way one hopes for a mathematics class. He arrives on time, begins by asking questions, assembles a neat body of work, pulls the students into participation, and maintains an orderly environment. The class is engaged. They seem to sense the partnership between themselves and this professor. Someone once said to him, "You don't even know you have a handicap." Students have been known to take weeks to notice, and some are never quite sure. He adamantly refuses to let anyone make a fuss about the fact that he is blind. He is mathematics professor Theral Moore. As a teaching award winner, he's one of our best. He came to UF in 1955 with a fresh PhD from the University of Missouri. While not the oldest member of the mathematics faculty, he's been there the longest. He was born with retinitis pigmentosa. The symptoms are tunnel vision and fading of the central vision. Theral's vision degenerated rapidly, leaving him with minimal sight and legally blind. In his junior year at the University of Arkansas, the professor told him about the binoculars that jewelers use, the jeweler's loop, for magnifying close-up objects. Till that time, he had depended on readers. With the binoculars, Theral could read, seeing a few letters at a time. As he points out, mathematics writing is terse and logical, condensed, so the binoculars, which would be hopeless for any large amount of reading, work well for mathematics. During this time, he continued his research in topology and wrote a book, Elementary General Topology, which appeared in 1964. He used binoculars until 1972, when the retinal nerves completely detached and he became totally blind. Next section is I call visual versus formal. At this stage, I'm going to speculate a bit about the cognitive modes of mathematicians. This is sure to stir up my colleagues. They get stirred up pretty easily. I tend to view two modes in our discipline: the visual, predominantly for the geometrically oriented, and the formal, for the symbolically oriented. It's not a clean dichotomy. Mathematicians become familiar with both modes. Still, I would argue that within individuals there are tendencies or preferences for one mode over the other. Theral is a topologist. Topology is strongly visual. It's a geometric subdivision of mathematics. This confounds me. He cannot see. He must deal with mathematical objects formally. I'm wrong. He sees with his mind's eye. In 1972, he switched to number theory. Now this makes some sense to me. Parts of number theory are very formal. Aha, he could not see, he reverted to formalism. Again, I'm wrong. He said he had no means of staying current in topology, so he began a collaboration with Edwin Hadlock, a number theorist. Through the grace of this collaboration, he extended his research program. So much for my psychology. In 1962, Theral married Nancy Hadlock, the daughter of his collaborator. They have two sons, Stephen and David, and at that time at least 3 grandchildren. I haven't kept up. Nancy escorts them to and from classes. He recently completed a book, Complex Analysis. In working on the book, Nancy learned LaTeX, a mathematical typesetting language. LaTeX is not for the faint of heart. It's difficult for a non-mathematician or someone who doesn't use mathematics regularly to really get onto LaTeX. Nancy did it. LaTeX has more in common with a programming language than a word processor. Working from a set of notes, she did the typing. Cadre of students checked the formatting. It was then read to Theral, and he would listen closely to the prose and rewrite each argument. Then the revision loop would return to Nancy, and in this manner they produced a book in just over 2 years. The next section is called The Dark Room. To understand what he does, I devised a little experiment. I imagine sitting in a dark room. It's a lecture hall. I can hear the speaker. The speaker says something like, "Now you will notice that along this curve, I cannot see its drawing. If we come back to this formula," he'd written a formula on the board 10 minutes earlier. Someone in the audience asked, "Is the second line on the middle board correct?" I'm struggling to remember the layout of the boards. There's another question. "Can we not view the value of x?" There's a diagram on the board where x is being held hostage. So it goes. My only hope for understanding is to keep a complete mental picture of the lecture. The experiment runs away from me. Now, I'm the speaker, and the tables have been turned. I'm speaking the speaker's words. Somehow I'm writing the formulas on the board without seeing them, drawing the pictures and labeling of the values without seeing them, and the questions being addressed to me. In this way, the runaway second part of the experiment, I begin to understand what Theral does every day. Next section, the narrative flow. Theral prepares his lectures by listening to them. He has tapes of the books that he uses. In the past, the tapes were prepared by student readers. Now he gets a full set of tapes from a company in New Jersey, produces this sort of thing, and the examples that the books uses and the exercises. All this material he carefully organizes. It is presented, there is a rhythm to the lectures as he combines his story with the board book. My colleagues in the humanities have talked about the narrative flow in their work. The narrative flow is built around a sequence of cues that is filled out in the presentation. Lectures in mathematics are much the same where theorems, formulas, and diagrams constitute milestones that guide the flow of the presentation on the theoretical terrain. We use pictures to display concisely the relationships among variables of visual cues. Most of us carry a variety of cues into the